Greetings, dear listeners, and welcome to a new episode of our Giant Leap podcast, presented by the Diversity and Gender Equality Project Group of the Space Generation Advisory Council. Our Giant Leap discusses diversity, equity, and inclusion issues within the international space industry. Why is diversity important? Why should we fight for it if we are not a minority? Why should we aim to create a more inclusive industry? Wouldn't it be easier to just ignore these questions and focus on science and technology? Is equality really worth it? At some point, we all have to stop and take a moment to reflect. Why are there people in the streets manifesting for gender equality and LGBTQIA+ rights? Aren't these questions just hindering the advancement of space sector? All these questions must be asked. All these questions must be treated with the utmost care and delicacy. Because if we cannot answer them, then what is the meaning behind our fight for inclusion and diversity? If we can't address them, then this podcast is in vain. Dear listeners, there is no better time than now to ask and answer these questions. As we celebrate the Pride Month, a time to celebrate love in all its shapes and forms, answering this question only seems appropriate. My name is Amin, and today I'll be joined by Cécile Deprez, they. Cécile is a satellite positioning specialist in the German Aerospace Center and an active LGBTQIA+ rights defender. With Cécile, we will dive into her story, how it all started, and why she is such a relentless fighter for human rights. And in our journey, we will try to answer these questions and more. So let's get to it. Cécile, it's our pleasure to have you on the podcast with us today.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the invitation. I'm really glad to join the podcast.
Thank you. It's our pleasure, really our pleasure to have you. So, Cécile, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? How did you end up where you are today? And a little bit just to get to know you.
Yeah, sure. So I'm originally from Belgium. I'm from the French-speaking part of Belgium. I am now living in Munich, in Germany, south of Germany, close to the mountains and the big lakes, with my cats, which might interfere during the podcast recording, unfortunately. I studied geomatics in Belgium at the University of Liège. It's something that is not very well known. It's a field that mixes geographical information and informatics. So from there, I actually started working on satellite positioning with Galileo, which is the European satellite constellation for positioning, the equivalent of GPS for Europe. I worked for 4 years in Belgium at the university where I studied. I did a research work there, aiming to get a PhD, but I never finished. So after 4 years, I quit because of terrible relationship with my supervisor. I decided to move to Germany, far away from Belgium, get a little bit of distance physically and mentally from the university and the supervisor. And I went to the German Aerospace Center, which is a famous research institute in Germany, but in Europe in general. I think it's very well known. And I started working there on the next generation of satellites for Galileo. So that's where I am, professionally speaking, on my technical aspects.
Wonderful. And just like to stop you there, because this is really interesting. You started PhD work and you stopped because of your relationship with your advisor. And I think a lot of people might face this at some point in their life, if they are pursuing any kind of research or any kind of aiming at doing anything in their professional career. At some point, you are stuck to work with people that you don't actually get along with, and to make the decision to stop and move far away. How was it for you?
So these were not easy times. There was a situation of moral harassment. After 2 years, I think we started exchanging emails only with the full PhD committee in copy, like with my supervisor, and not meeting in person anymore. It was very complicated. I had a 1 year long depression, and it took me the distance, the physical distance, and the COVID, because I moved like 2 weeks before the beginning of the COVID. I moved in Germany, and because we were in lockdown, I was on my own. I was far away from this PhD, and I had a decision to make, whether I would continue it or not. At the German Aerospace Center, they were expecting me to come with a PhD, and they wanted me to finish it. So I knew like I would have also to negotiate over there whether I could come without the PhD or not. But I think like just having some time for myself, realizing that this had such a negative impact on my life and on my mental health, and that I didn't need to finish it to, like, I could feel good about myself without finishing the PhD. It's a lot of social pressure, the PhD. When you start it, people, I don't know, see you like if you finish a PhD, it means that you manage to like accomplish something very exceptional. People look at you as someone very clever, and I don't know, there is a whole thing socially about the PhD. And I was very pressured into finishing because of this. My family also, I think, without knowing it, like they were just saying to me, "Oh, come on, like 6 more months and you're gonna finish. Just hold on." It just, at some point, if it doesn't work anymore and if it's like too much on the mental health, I don't think that it's worth continuing. And in the end, I'm doing research at the German Aerospace Center. I talked to them. I talked to my boss directly when I wanted to take the decision of stopping the PhD, and he told me that they knew other cases like this, and of course they knew it, because I think at least like 1/3 of the PhD end up this way for the same reasons. And so they were just like completely fine with the fact that I would not have a PhD, and they said that if I wanted to start another, I could still do it there, which I haven't done in the end.
You mentioned a lot of social pressure and family telling you to just like, yeah, 6 more months, you can do it. And I think this happens a lot, and on very broad perspective too. Even if it's not a PhD, even if you are a student and you are just trying to pass some kind of exam or something, you get this all the time, that at some point finishing the goal becomes more important than keeping yourself healthy physically and mentally. And we get all this success obsession that you need to do something, that you need to be something, otherwise you are not really worth it and you don't have that social status. And I think stories like this are very important, and I hope our listeners find them important too, because they give hope that that you can actually stop, that you are not condemned to keep doing something that you don't necessarily feel comfortable to. And at some point, what matters the most is our mental health. In the end, nobody knows what we feel, right? Nobody knows what we go through. And it's always a decision between you and yourself to make, right? Thank you for sharing that with us.
I also think like you learn a lot, even like those 4 years were very difficult for me. You keep on learning. Like I everything I did during those 4 years led me to now work at the research center in Germany. It wouldn't have been the case if I hadn't done this PhD and all the research work there. So you can value this, and actually they also paid me according like to 4 years of research. Like they accounted for it like when I moved to Germany. So it's something that you can value even if the title is not there in the end.
Yeah, it's like, well, in the end, the title means nothing. What really means is the capacities that you get out of the work, the actual work. In the end, it's just like something. It's just 2 letters that you put in front of your name on LinkedIn, basically. That's what a PhD is. Yeah, but in the end, what really means is the skills that we learn during the way. And I think we don't really value the skills that we learn during our journey a lot in our society. We always, most of the time, only care about the titles, and we give all the credits to the title, not to the actual person behind. If a person have a PhD, even though I don't know if that's the case, but probably there is people in the world who have a PhD, but they don't know actually what they are working on. And it happens a lot, and you find yourself like, okay, so is actually a PhD equals genius? It's not true. And I think it goes a lot deeper into the society. If you have somebody who is a manager, CEO, the name comes with a lot of social status, and we forgot the people behind. We judge the name, we judge the status, and not who is the real person, right? And I think we all feel that at some point in our lives. So again, Cécile, thank you so much for the story. This is this is very important in our podcast because we try to emphasize on the different path that people can do to get into the space industry. And in research, if you want to do research, I think the common consensus is that you cannot do it without a PhD, but stories like this prove that you can. What matters the most is that you have the skills and the perseverance to actually continue, even though you might not get the title. So this is the first question. This is how we get to know Cécile. But the other side of the Cécile that we want to focus on today is her relentless fight on all social media platforms and even beyond for human rights. I happen to know Cécile through Instagram, actually. And I followed her a lot on Instagram, and I was amazed by but basically not a day go by without Cécile posting something about human rights, sexism, discrimination, something to fight against this. And I guess the question is here, why? Why do you keep doing that? Why is it when sometimes it's not your fight and you keep fighting for it? What pushes you?
Well, thank you first, for following me and for the compliment. I think where did it start? I started something very technical, and I was not very satisfied with just working in a technical field. Something is missing for me, and this is the social aspect. So I integrated the social aspect already when I was in Belgium. I was working for organization called Make-A-Wish, which grants the wishes of kids which are very sick. So I worked there for 4 years. And when I moved to Germany, then I was, as I mentioned, not in a very good state. So it took me kind of 1 year to recover from what was happening. And it was COVID also. And then I was wondering what I could do that could be useful and that could actually match all my feminist ideas, because during COVID time, I read so much and I wanted to do something about what I was reading, all the inequalities I was reading about. So I joined first an association in France called Pépites Sexistes, which is actually calling out sexist advertisement. So, for instance, if you want to sell a water heater and then you put the ass of a woman next to it, for some reason, which actually happens quite a lot. It sounds ridiculous when I say it, but it's all the time like this. And so this kind of things, we call them out. Also more subtle things, it was La Fête des Mères, so it was Mother's Day in France, I think, last weekend. And there were so many advertisement for cleaning products or for a vacuum cleaner for your mother. So these kind of things. So first I joined this and I was focusing more on sexism in advertisement. But then at work, I started feeling much more confident and I started then noticing other things that just my technical work. So the sexism that was at work, I knew it from Belgium because it was very overt. We had some professors making awful comments in the middle of a lecture, wondering why there were women in the auditorium, because anyway they would have children and stop working at some point. So what was the point of teaching them? So that was that level in Belgium. And then I came here in Germany and nobody was speaking like this, but people were still making comments and small things that made you feel inferior. For instance, when I went for the interview at the German Aerospace Center, my colleagues would see me kind of stressed in the kitchen before the interview. And to try to cheer me up, they told me, oh, you should not worry because they're going to hire you anyway. You're a woman. How come the people I'm going to work with, and they already look down on me. They assume that I'm going to get in the position, not because I've got the skills, but just because of my gender. So this is the kind of things I started noticing. And I started fighting and advocating for this. And creating, employee resource group for women and gender minorities. And then later employee resource group for LGBTQIA plus people, and then internationals. Because at the DLR, the German Aerospace Center, none of these groups existed before. And so women were isolated. I didn't know anyone who was from the LGBTQ community. For 2 years, I had no idea if they were anybody else. And so just getting in touch one with another and be able to discuss the issues that we are facing, that leads us to imagine solution. We are very creative and we have so many ideas and we are very willing to support and implement those ideas. So it's not just about criticizing what is in place and not doing anything. It's about changing it to make it a better place for anybody else who would be joining, and for the people there, of course. So yeah, I started like with those groups, and then like hearing so many testimonies, I started talking about it outside of the German Aerospace Center, and now I give talks also on the side about this. And I've joined several groups outside, like Women in Aerospace, Women in AI. I try to bring to those women-centered group a vision that gender minorities should also be included in the fights, because we experience also sexism plus some other phobia. And so yeah, I started like expanding a little bit to groups outside and trying to bring intersectionality more in the discussion.
I see. You said a lot of interesting things, and one of them that actually got with me is, while in Belgium it was quite obvious that there is sexism, like you can hear it directly in universities, and at some point I also heard a lot of that too. While growing up, I heard a lot of people saying, you should, for women, why are you even studying engineering or computers? Why are you even studying point? Like, it doesn't matter what field. At some point you hear people saying that. And at the same time, at other countries, at other levels, you still feel the same aura of sexism, the same aura of discrimination, but it's more subtle. So it's never really out there. So I think the thing is, because a lot of people, you hear them all on social media, will go and say, but the situation is better now. We reached some sort of gender equality, less discrimination, less racism or something. But the thing is that I want to mention here, and I want to hear what your thoughts about it, is, did we actually reach there? Or are we just like camouflaging the problem? Are we just saying that, hey, we no longer make comments, but it still feel that way. We're still gonna make them between ourselves. We're still gonna make you feel them, but we're not gonna gonna say them out loud. And I don't think that's an actual improvement in the right direction. I think we still stuck there, mostly like running in our place. We did not. Yeah, there is an effort happening, but we are not going anywhere. What do you think about that?
I agree, actually. I think that we put a nice color on top of the issue. We are more politically correct. People know what they can say, what they cannot say, or some of the, like the latest one are still learning. But I mean, most people know. But the issues are still there because the society we are living in is biased. Like, you know, maybe this will of power and privilege. So based on the intersectionality concept from Kimberly Crenshaw, you have this wheel that shows that the center position are the one with the most power. So it's going to be men, heterosexual, like from the high social class, with like money, with no neurodiversity, like also no disability, white people, of course. So this is going to be like in our societies, the people who have the power. And this is very obvious that this is what is still working right now. So when we grow up with prejudices, and this is normal because we receive so many information over the day. Our brain is just not capable of filtering everything, so we make categories, and the society reinforces the categories in the movies, in the books, and in everything. And our parents and the professors, like without even knowing it, they just confirm some biases we already had. And if we don't think about it, we respect this hierarchy that we've been taught. We have those biases, and then we will just act according to them because this is what we know. But then we always discriminate on the same people. And I think what's happening right now is that most people know that overt discrimination, the obvious one, is not something that you can do. And actually, in many countries also now, there are like judiciary procedures in place, like against discrimination when you hire someone or something like this. But still, like the small things are still there. And I think it's for everyone. There is nobody who does not discriminate. We all do in a way or another, just because it requires a lot of knowledge to be able to know about all the other groups, and it's impossible for someone to have it all. We can just try to learn how to be better, and like how to better work with the colleagues, like with the colleagues around us, like no matter where they are coming from, where they were raised, in which family, which social class, how they talk, how they walk, like who they are sleeping with, who they are falling in love with. Like this should be things that we should learn how to deal with, like in a way that is not discriminatory.
Definitely, I agree with you. Definitely, I think that's the actual sign of progress. It's not the political correct way of talking or way of acting. And it's not even, as you mentioned, putting numbers saying that we need to hire 20, well, I don't know, like for now, for my experience in engineering school, you hear it all the time, we need to reach 50%. Well, the goal is not actually numbers. The goal is actually to have people who want to integrate the field, who want to study this field, studying it without feeling any kind of pressure. Mm-hmm. And again, and the thing that these numbers actually do is what you experience firsthand is like saying that they minimize your worth as a person and your capabilities, your skill set, and they link your success or you being integrated to any kind of job with the fact that you come out of minority. And that becomes a really problem because nobody will, even if you get the job, nobody values your skill set. They only say that you're there because you're a minority. And that's terrible. That's definitely what we don't want to have. The thing is very easy when you think about it. The people with the best skill set gets the job. The one with who had who's the most qualified should get the job. And then
it doesn't work like this, actually.
Yeah.
The concept of meritocracy, that actually most of the people in privileged position would believe into, that they will hire the best qualified person for the job. But this is without counting on their own biases. If I have to hire someone for my team, for instance, I think the first person I'm going to think about is going to be a white male my age, and that is coming from Europe, because these are the people I'm working with all the time. These are the people who in my mind represent aerospace. So even me fighting against sexism and against all these biases, my first idea of the ideal candidate is going to be biased. So meritocracy doesn't work, of course, because we never choose the most qualified person. We are going to choose maybe the person who grew up in the same village, because we have an affinity with them. We want to, as human, I think we don't really like to be challenged. We like things that confirm our own thoughts. We like to be with people who confirm whatever we like. And so meeting those people, you want to have them with you. And so you're going to be biased towards them.
And for this problem, do you think that AI could actually help? If we had, instead of interviews with human being, one-on-one interviews, and somebody coming with all their bias, do you think that having AI algorithms that can actually choose based on performance, not on, and hopefully not have any bias, could actually help solve this problem?
I think you already kind of give the answer here. If AI was without bias, that work, but AI is not without bias. AI is trained on human, and humans are biased. It's impossible for AI to be without bias. I think there are many books written about how to do interviews in a fair way, not so, for instance, you would have someone else picking the CV and no picture, no names. I don't know if you're aware, but if you're a Jamal, your chances to be hired are less than a Greg. So you would need to remove the names, the origin, anything that would give an indication of the person, and then give the CV with only the the master that the people get. And even there, people would be biased, because if you have a master in geomatics like me, and we were 6 finishing, and then I see one of the person I'm going to interview also is coming from geomatics, I'm going, oh my God, I know so few of them. And you create this affinity bias. So it's extremely hard not to be biased. What you should do is have several people on the board of interviewees, coming from different origins also, and having different stories, because then you have a collective decision, and everybody's going to be biased a bit, but then you can manage to reduce it by being many. And then you should have also a list of questions that is very clear from the beginning, everybody asking the same question, and you cannot spend 2 hours of the interview describing the village you grew up in, and the interviewee also, and how cool it was, and the cows there and stuff. So you actually have to be very thorough in how you prepare it.
Definitely, yeah, I agree. And do you think that being aware about one's bias is possible, or at least some of them? And so when they go into an interview or when they try to interact with other people, keeping that awareness in mind, could it actually help with the interaction? Because I guess, at least from my experience, when back in the times, I was going to start a conversation with other people and then go talk normally as if it was normal conversation for me from my perspective, and then some way ended up hurting the other person I'm talking to. But I think right now, at least from my perspective, again, is having this awareness of this biases and this social prejudice that we grew up with can actually be very helpful once we be aware with them and start to actually put the effort to go into conversation with other people.
Well, I don't have the feeling that this works if you are not surrounded by people with different background and different lives. Like if you don't, you have to train it. Like you cannot just read about it and be like, so there are those biases, and then expect that you will behave like without biases afterwards. I think like it comes from being a lot around like different people. So like for, I don't know, in a very male dominated industry like mine, it's like if you never worked with women before, you might know there are some biases against women. You might like be able like to cite them to me. That doesn't change the fact that if you have like for the first time a women interview, you are still like deeply inside. You never work with a woman, so this is a bit complex. So I think this is why actually the numbers matter. And I know the quotas are not easy, and I suffer from the quotas also. Like I mentioned my experience, right, when I was hired. But at the same time, if we don't have many different people with different backgrounds in industry, we will never manage to get rid of those biases. It's because you work with people that maybe, I don't know, someone has an invisible disability, you learn about someone is gay, and then you realize that actually working with them is not different from working with your straight colleague with no disability. And it's because you actually actively work on those bias by doing so that you can, I think, be more open-minded in an interview process, for instance.
Yeah, I think that's quite true, because, what is very terrible is not actually being ignorant, is thinking that you know without actually knowing. So you end up that you say, like, you hear a lot of this, I am not sexist, I am not racist, I am not xenophobic, I am not homophobic or anything, while actually doing the kind of discrimination, not knowingly. So I think what can be even more dangerous is having this illusion of knowledge, of saying that, no, not at all, I'm really open-minded, I'm really inclusive person. I think we should, maybe a lot of people, all the people maybe should stop and reflect on our own actions and see from a third-person perspective, from somebody who's looking from the outside, their reactions to our actions. Yeah, what do you think about that?
You're definitely right. I think nobody is like free from like reproducing discrimination and biases. This is how it is. It's really hard, I think, for oneself to look at your day and be like, where did I fuck up today? Like, this is not so easy. And if you, sometimes you will just never know, because you would need someone to point it out for you. Like, you just cannot know sometimes. And so what is important is more like, if someone actually calls you out on something that you've done that is not okay, it's how you're going to react to it. So I think like we should be all very humble, because we don't know everything. And then if someone tells me, Cécile, this is so racist what you just said, I've got two options. I can be like, oh, no, I'm not racist. Like, I'm giving talks about like against discrimination. I didn't mean it this way. You didn't interpret it right. Well, that's obviously a very bad reaction, because if the other person tells me what I said is racist and they felt really bad because of what I said, I can never say that their feelings are not true. Like, they didn't feel good and I did something wrong there. So the other way of reacting is to apologize first without a but in the end. Like, your intentions don't matter. So just, it's okay. You did something that was wrong. Someone called you out. Learn from it. So apologizing to the person and then being like, okay, so if this was wrong, would you give me an explanation on why? The person doesn't have to, of course. Like, they might have like already given so many explanations on why this is not okay to say such a thing. Internet is there, and there's so many resources. Like, there are people like me giving workshops and talks. Like, you can get information when you need it. Like, social medias are very useful. But then like another thing that you can do from there is like deepen your knowledge about this. Okay, I said something that was racist. Maybe I'm doing other racist things. And so like, as you delve a little bit more into the topic, you might realize that there were things that you were doing that were not appropriate before. And you then create yourself as a safer person for people of color and people who experience racism in general. And you can then try to be an ally for them, asking them how they would have wished you to support them in this situation. Like if it wasn't you making this comment, how could you support them at best, and then try to work out with them a solution or like a way of doing things. And everybody is different, so they might not work with everyone. Like don't expect everybody to be like, oh, you're amazing.
Yeah, definitely. And just like one thing that I kind of want to say here is that for a long time, probably since the dawn of humanity, we are locked in this idea that we should not be a bad person and we should always be good. So we kind of like the idea that if somebody calls you racist or somebody calls you that you did any kind of discrimination, if you actually admit it, that would be saying that you are a bad person. And then that brings all the history of humanity upon your shoulders, like a bad person, and you are definitely we're going to hell, and this is the end of you, and whatever. And maybe it's not maybe. We must change that. We must say that admitting that we did a mistake is not proof that we are a wrong person, a bad person. It's actually quite the opposite. It's that we are opening up for learning and improving. So instead of having the defensive reaction of saying, no, I'm not, I'm a very good person, I'm not this, I'm not that, accept it, say that I made a mistake, and that is made a mistake that I don't want to do or redo in the future. So what can I learn from here? And what can I change so me or the people around me don't do that? So it's time to take that notion way apart, that being good or being bad, or it's just like this always that we do, that is like a binary division of people, that, and just try to admit it. Mistakes happen. People end up saying the meanest thing, whether their intentions are good or bad, and the feelings of the person that we are talking to actually matters, and they are matter the most. So if they say they are hurt, it doesn't matter our attention, it doesn't matter what we had in the back of my mind. What actually matters is the consequences on the person that I'm talking to. And if they are hurt, I have no right to minimize their feelings or to say that, no, you should not feel that. Well, I'm sorry, but they are my feelings, and they happen, so
exactly.
You telling, yeah, exactly. Right. So what will be your message for the people who are struggling with this notion of being good or bad? Or
nobody said that it would be easy, but at the same time, like, it would be like, what is the point? Like, if there is not a little bit of challenge, I mean, it's what is interesting is like getting like into a better person and being someone that people feel safe around. This is a huge reward, like knowing that a friend of yours, like maybe you can be friend with people who are like very different from you. Like imagine you are straight and you are cisgender, so you identify to the biological sex that was given to you at birth, and knowing, for instance, that you can behave in a safe way for a trans person, so someone who actually had a transition, so doesn't recognize their gender as their biological sex. Well, this means a lot. Like, it's so much trust, and it feels like it's so great that you are able to be a safe person for someone with a complete different experience, because you took the time to learn and you took the time to actually discover something new. It brings like so much to just discover other perspective and other people. So that's a beautiful reward. It just, of course, it hurts. Nobody wants to be told like they are wrong, mostly like in academia. but but I think it's worth it. It's really nice.
Definitely. And I hope really we get at the point where we're actually improving is the goal, and that's not having the label of being good or bad.
Yeah.
So let's move forward to something that you kept saying during our conversation. Your field, the aerospace field, is male dominated. And it's actually getting this new aura around it, the new space that we keep hearing about it all the time, with the new companies coming in, with new satellites, new launches all day. And a lot of people here, at least from my experience as a student in the aerospace sector, a lot of people don't value the questions of inclusion and equality in the industry right now. And they are only focusing on the technological and scientific progress that the industry can go forward. So the thing is, my question is, if today we get the technology and the science advancement to go to another planet, to start life on another planet or a moon or something, are we ready as a society? Did we collect enough wisdom to go there? And so this new thing that we all are excited about, space, doesn't end up as, a new economical asset for us to fight over it. Did we get to that point to start getting all this hyped about the future?
Well, I think like if you just casually drop the words colonization in a conversation with friends anywhere, you realize that we are not ready. Like space is colonization somehow. Like what they intend to do is like go in other planets and like colonize and bring their own vision, their own way of living. We are definitely not ready because we are not ready like to make space for other things, and the people who are leading those movements are the less ready. I won't cite name, but there is a huge company, and the owner of that company is famously transphobic, has an issue with like also social classes. Like it's not someone that actually aims at doing good. And of course, like the technological aspects are interesting, and it's really great that we can develop technologies like this. But there is a huge oversight, I think, amongst the people who are working in science and engineering over sociological issues. So, for instance, I give lots of talk to those engineers and scientists. But if I bring the results of a sociology study in my talk, then they will question it. What they would obviously not do if I was bringing results of a scientific study, like I don't know, or like a engineering topic. Like they would be like, "Oh, okay, you found those numbers, great." But then if I bring something that is linked to sociology, they're like, "I'm not quite sure. I don't believe you because I didn't experience it." And so there is this disregard on sociology and on psychology and many topics that are, of course, essential if we want to establish somewhere else and create a community somewhere else. You have to understand those, and like we've proved, I think like those fields have proven, like we discussed the wheel of privileges and power, like how much our society has to learn still. We are destroying the earth with like everything we do, and it's so hard just to bring awareness, this is what I mean, to the people with like the most money in the world. Like they absolutely don't care about destroying what we have like here, like earth and stuff like this. So to be honest, I'm absolutely not excited about discovering other planets. I think like we should focus on trying to restore this one first and learn how to live on the planet without destroying it in the first place before going and colonizing other places.
Definitely. And like this, what you said really brings a quote that I really love. It's from a sci-fi writer. The quote goes something like this. So, the saddest aspect about life is that science collects knowledge faster than humanity collects wisdom. And so there is this endless race between like, we get to that scientific advancement very fast, but we are really, really as toddlers right now when it comes to sociology, when it comes to knowing how to interact with one another. And at some point, we actually lost sight of why we do science and engineering in the first place. It's to serve the society to be better. So if the society is not going to be better, but the invention that we are going to make, if the society is not ready right now, so the question will be, should we postpone that for later? Should we release the results that we have? It's like a huge question that probably cannot be answered in 5 minutes, but it's like something that I want to throw there, because hopefully a lot of our listeners are, the next generation of aerospace industry leaders, hopefully, and even in other fields and different other fields. And this is the kind of question that we will have to deal with, because most likely with our generation, with the people that are currently working, the young professionals and the people that are going to go into the field in the next few years, we will have to face this. Are we ready to go to another planet? Did we get the wisdom from a humanitarian point of view to live together on another planet? I think that we live under an illusion that somehow our problems are linked to Earth and not linked to us. So somehow if we go somewhere else, like all this sexism, all the racial discrimination will stay on Earth and will not accompany us. And I think we should wake up out of there. What do you think?
No, that would be the same. Like we will bring the same society models. Like there is no reason, like mostly because the question who will go there, who will have the money to move to another planet, are the one with the most bias and who never had to question their prejudices. So why would this change? So no, like definitely, I don't think this is such a wise idea. Or like it's gonna be like marvelous. I don't believe in this. Like you mentioned, shall we postpone like technologies we have and think a bit more? We don't have the choice, I think, unfortunately, like as we keep on developing. We see it with AI also a lot right now. Like those questions are essential, like ethics in AI. Like I don't know if you follow like this Miss AI contest that was created. Like, I mean, AI is so sexist already. It's fully like pornographic and so many like things. Like it's just so sad that this is already like it's just like a reflection of our society, and we barely control AI right now. Like those AI video with like the deep fake and everything that can be created with AI, it's really hard to control. We don't have the law, the regulations. So we can see already now how the technology is completely like it's way too far compared to what we can do as human. It's super interesting. It's a bit scary, but there are amazing things also that AI brings. So it's a balance, and it's exciting and scary, and I think that's the same for space.
Yeah, exactly. And I think this can be traced back to the shift that scientific education and engineering had between probably the 19th and 20th century. Before, most of the scientists, most of the people on the front line actually had courses in philosophy and in sociology and a lot of these things. So when you finish your college and you go into integrated workplace, you are not only an engineer, you are more than an engineer. You are an engineer who is aware about what is happening in society, who is politically active, who knows what is happening and probably in touch with society, so knows the impacts of what is going on right now. And what I think right now, at least from my experience as a student in the aerospace sector, is we don't value this as much right now. We don't actually focus on education. And what I think should be mentioned here is that we get courses about culture and art, but we get 2 hours of courses a week, at least from my experience, and we don't discuss these problems. A lot of these problems are censored. You don't get to talk about what is happening in the world because it doesn't align with the school policies. And isn't it the time to change that? What do you think? Is actually having sociology education with scientific background for people with scientific background in engineering crucial for the next step for humanity?
It means an activist work at the moment. I don't know if activist is like a wise term to use, but still, like when you see the progresses that are made towards diversity and inclusion, it's always still pushed by underrepresented groups and minorities themselves. Like we were talking just before about the 100 tampons story, the fact that the very first female suit for astronaut is like, it's only since like 2023 that they have been working on this. And so it's like, and these are like gender issues, which are the one on which most people are working. So all the other discrimination are so far behind still. So yeah, I think like it's still at the moment a work that is led by a small minority of people who are discriminated people, with some allies, of course. And it will take a lot of time before anything changes. It's not going to change organically, like naturally, because of evolution. It changes because we bring those changes, and we force the people who are at the moment at the head of all these big companies to look at other things and to consider other problems. But it's always like a fight to make them see the interest into considering other aspects. So I'm not really hopeful it's going to change that fast. Like we're going to see some improvement in some fields from time to time, but everything solved at once, I don't think so.
Definitely. The fight for inclusion, for diversity, for humanity, I shall say, is not an easy one. Otherwise, it would have been done a long time ago. It's a long fight, it's a tedious fight, but that's why we are here, right? That's why we should not give up for the people, for one day at least. Well, my hope is that my kids or their kids, or when they go into the space industry or any other kind of industry actually that they are interested about, or arts or whatever, they don't face that. They find a field that is welcomed there with an opening arms, that is welcoming them because for their humanity, and we stop looking at the surfaces, at all this stuff, and we really see beyond the link between us all, that we are all shared this small planet in this vast universe, and we don't actually have another choice other than co-live together and to grow together and be stronger together and to accept each one of us for who they truly are without trying to impose our prejudice on them. I think that's the kind of future that all of humanity should aim for and strive for. And hopefully one day, and hopefully with this podcast, with people like Cécile fighting there on the front lines, we get one step closer there every time. So Cécile, any last words for our listeners?
I think it's a collective effort, but it's also like up to each and every one of us to push in the right directions. So call out things that you see that are not okay, and then try together to bring a sense of awareness. Realize what your privileges are. It's not a bad word, privileges. It's okay. We all have privileges, but like when we are aware of them, then we can, like, I am a white person with no disability, for instance, so I am very well aware that I've got big biases that are like I need to work on, like, and to be sure that I am not discriminatory toward people that I don't know actually, and experiences I've never had. So we all have to consider where we are talking from, our own points of view, and then try to work better together, knowing that we are not perfect and this is completely fine. Just trusting that by listening to each other, taking each other feedback, and like making sure that we are building a safe place around us, we're going to create a better world for the Earth, but also potentially for other planets later.
Hopefully. Thank you so much, Cécile, for being our guest on this podcast. It was such a pleasure to have this conversation with you.
Thank you very much.
And with this, we conclude another episode of the Our Giant Leap podcast. But don't you worry, because our journey through space shall continue. Until then, keep shining, dear listeners. The Our Giant Leap podcast is brought to you by the Diversity and Gender Equality Project Group of the Space Generation Advisory Council. You can interact directly with us on the Diversity and Gender Equality Project Group's social media and leave feedback or advice from your side. Also, let us know, who would you like us to interview next? Thank you all for listening. I'm your host Amin, signing off.